The Gentle Pine's Purpose by Candace George Conradi. It stood away from the edge of the forest in a meadow of tall grass and flowers. Each day the beautiful pine reached toward the sun, and each night it heaved a sigh of wonder for the stars that shone above. It knew somehow that it had a purpose, but what that purpose was seemed a mystery. Maybe, the little pine thought, my purpose is connected to the stars. Every day it wondered about these things. Every night it fell asleep wondering the same thing. Years passed as the seasons each spun magic around the pine. The rains fed its roots and the sun nourished its deeply colored green needles. Spring brought birds that rested in its branches and sang beautiful songs. Sometimes the pine's feathered friends built their homes and raised their babies, deeply protected within its branches. The gentle pine thought, this must be my purpose, to be a home for other creatures. Sighing and breathing in the freshness of the rain-soaked soil, it felt gratitude for the spring. In summers, the tree grew and became stronger. Moms and dads brought their children to picnic in the shade of the gentle pine. Laying checkered cloths on the ground, they ate and played ball and sang songs. The meadow was a grand place to run and play. The tree smiled and thrived under the children's laughter. During those times, the tree would think, maybe this is my purpose, to give shade to these humans. Summertime also brought great bald eagles to the meadow. Occasionally one landed upon the limbs of the gentle pine. It shared stories of other lands and things it had seen. After the great eagle flew away, the gentle pine thought, maybe this is my purpose, to provide rest for weary travelers. And again the pine gratefully sighed for the warmth and beauty of summer. Each fall, evenings delivered a little shiver as the temperature began to drop. The other trees in the distance, the ones that were unlike the growing pine, began to turn beautiful colors of red and orange and yellow. Eventually, the leaves all said goodbye to the limbs on which they hung. Sometimes the great fall wind blew leaves into the pine's branches. The gentle pine gathered the leaves within and around it. The squirrels came to collect the leaves for their winter homes. It was in the brisk autumn air that the gentle pine again thought, this must be my purpose, to gather these leaves for the squirrels so they can be warm in the winter. Oh, how the tree loved the fall. But to the pine, winter was the most beautiful season of all. It always began slowly with crisp, clear skies and stars shining like diamonds against the black, cold night. Then slowly, clouds came in and soft white petals of snow fell. At first, flakes fell lightly until each flake was joined by other flakes. Soon they all gathered together in one big blanket that covered the earth for as far as the eye could see. As the snow fell, mounds collected on the ends of each bough. The tree felt so elegant in its annual winter coat. Snowbirds often huddled around the trunk of the gentle pine. Lovingly, it drew its branches in closely to protect its feathered friends from the cold north wind. Chirping with gratitude and song, the gentle pine thought, I believe this is my purpose, to provide shelter for my friends from the storms. As the winds moved its branches, the little tree cradled the birds and rocked them into safe slumber. Winter, how grateful the tree was for winter. Time passed and the tree grew strong and tall. One fall, the north wind arrived earlier than usual, bringing changes to the land once more. Not knowing why, the gentle pine sensed that something important was about to happen. From where the pine stood in the meadow, it could see the gatherers had returned. They were once again clearing the forest. The wind whispered to the gentle pine, and it somehow knew to say goodbye to its friends. Then, quite unlike itself, it fell asleep. The pine awakened to the feel of the wind as it flew along atop a pile of other pine trees. Having been rooted and unmoving all its life, it now found itself speeding past landscapes unknown. There were rivers and lakes of different sizes. There were unfamiliar trees. There was a long, winding, smooth black ribbon that seemed to guide the way. There were strange-looking boxes lining the black ribbon it was moving on. Traveling for the first time in its life, the gentle tree was amazed at the world that swirled around. Living the thrill of the eagle's stories, the gentle pine once again thought, "This must be my purpose, to explore as the eagle explores." Slowly, the landscape stopped whizzing past. Eventually, the little pine felt a lug and then a thump. Whatever was carrying it came to a grinding halt. "Back up the truck this way," the pine heard, and then all was still. Big burly men lifted it to the ground. It had never felt thirst before, but now it did. It missed its earthly roots that had always fed it water. Then, much to its relief, the same big burly men carefully lowered the thirsty pine into a shallow pool. As soon as the water circulated through its trunk, the pine sighed with relief, humming in its own unique way. Ah. One by one, it was joined by the other trees from the truck. Aisle after aisle was lined with small containers of water, and the gentle pine could hear a chorus of ahs as each tree was lowered into its own little pond. Some of the trees were giants, others were smaller. They each had different personalities, but the one closest to the pine seemed afraid and timid. The gentle pine reassured it everything would be okay, and soon the little anxious tree began to relax. How happy the gentle pine was to help its new friend. Again it thought, "Now at last I know my purpose. It is to give others courage." In the days that followed, people walked up and down the aisle of trees. One by one, trees began to disappear. Then one day, a man and a woman arrived holding the hands of a little girl and a little boy. They walked around and around the aisles, often pausing to look at the gentle pine. Then, much to the tree's surprise, the boy and girl stopped, and pointing at it, they cried, "This one, Mommy and Daddy, we want this one." The children's happiness lifted the pine's spirits so much it was sure it was floating off the ground. This time it was certain. As the pine was lifted from its small pond, it thought, "This just has to be my purpose, to give happiness to others." And it seemed like such a perfect purpose. The pine stood tall as it was carried and placed upon the family's truck. One by one, each family member climbed in. Soon the gentle pine was once again flying along another great black ribbon, turning this way and that way. As quickly as the truck had flown along, it at once came to a stop. The dad lifted the tree to the ground, and the children surrounded it, pushing their cold noses deep into its boughs. "Welcome to your new home, beautiful pine." And then taking a deep breath and with a little squeal, they cried, "Oh, Daddy, it smells so wonderful." The gentle pine was so distracted by the children's excitement, it did not notice it had been carried into its new home. With the help of Mom, Dad gently placed the tree into another small pond. Then, like magic, there was music. The family sang along with the songs and danced. The kitty played with its new Christmas toy. The dad reached into a box, and the pine felt itself being draped in lights that looked like stars caught from heaven. The family members each hung special ornaments, one by one, onto the limbs of the gentle pine, telling it stories about why each one was special. Soaking in the love that filled the room, the gentle pine realized it had never had this much fun. In the joy of the moment, it felt so sure. This just has to be my purpose, to be part of a family. Each day, Mom came to refill the tree's little pond. Each morning and before bedtime, the children came to say hello and good night, sharing family stories with the pine. Before bedtime, the family curled up on the couch together with their kitty, and Dad or Mom read bedtime stories while the family sipped on their cups of hot cocoa. Every day, a new brightly colored box with big ribbons appeared on the floor around the pine. As the days grew, the gentle pine began to feel a new kind of love deep within its heart that spilled out to the end of each limb. It was the most wonderful feeling the tree had ever experienced. As it began to settle into its new routine, it seemed there was an endless stream of joy that filled each nook and cranny of every room. One morning, when the sun had barely peeked over the mountaintop, the children arrived at the foot of the tree. For a short moment, together with the gentle pine, the three sat in the silence of Christmas. First laughter, then giggles, filled the air as each box was lifted and shaken. The pine was nearly vibrating with happiness. In time, Mom and Dad joined the small children, while the kitten pounced on loose ribbons and paper. The gentle greenery of the pine seemed to shimmer more brightly on this morning, while the family joyfully opened each package. This time, the pine's purpose shifted, as if a gentle wind had blown through its inner rings. It began to hum a new melody. The pine sat in the glow of this newly found love and discovered it was happy simply to be the tree that it was. Once the packages were opened and the room put into order, the house became quieter. There was still soft music, only it was a different melody. There were still stories, but not every night. In the time since Christmas, the older and now wiser pine was alone more often. It thought about its wonderful life as the kitty purred and slept nearby. Since arriving at its new home, each day that had passed had felt like a year. While it still stood tall, it was no longer able to drink water. In the silence of the night, after everyone went to sleep, the pine stared at the beautiful stars through the window and thought about its life. Every moment of my life has had a special purpose. The birds that once rested in my branches, I was their friend and protected them. The people who picnicked around me in the meadow, I gave them shade. The eagle that stopped by to tell me of his adventures, I offered him a place to rest. The little tree who was frightened, I gave it courage. The friendships I have found brought happiness to everyone, including me. My new family, we gave each other joy, love, and laughter. But the most important thing I learned was that being me is the purpose that matters most of all. After all is said and done, it is enough for me to just be a gentle pine. It felt a shiver run through its limbs with that thought. Even the shiny red bell that hung from the end of one of its branches tinkled in agreement. The pine turned its attention to the stars and gazed. It had always been amazed and silenced by their beauty. As the sun poked its head over the foothills, its light poured warmth through the windows. The family gathered around the gentle pine one last time. The precious ornaments were one by one placed back into boxes. The hanging stars were removed from its branches. Wanting to give the family one last gift, the gentle pine took a deep, deep breath, and like magic, the house was filled again with the beautiful scent of a forest. The family all stopped and breathed in the intoxicating fragrance. Then, feeling very tired, the gentle pine fell into a deeply satisfying sleep. It awakened to an illuminating light of stardust. Oh, it was such a soothing, kind light. Hundreds of small fireflies surrounded each of its branches, tending to it with care. All the purposes of all the moments of the gentle pine poured over it like a light spring shower. A melody filled the space in and around it, lifting it higher and higher. As it rested in this pool of stardust, the pine began to swirl around and around and around until it became the stars it had once looked upon. The tall man that had once lifted the gentle pine into its new home ran his big hands through the dust that lay at his feet. The sound of his mulching machine now quiet, he gave thanks for the life of the little tree. Scooping up the dust and putting it into a big pail, he walked along his property where the family's trees and plants grew. Together, the family began spreading the tree dust onto the ground. The dust would keep the plants warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It was the final gift of the gentle pine. By the next spring, seeds began to sprout and flowers began to bloom on the hill. And there in the midst of the flowers a new seedling arrived. A tiny but strong wild pine reached for the sun and the fresh clean air, and breathing in deeply, it smiled. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose. The end and the beginning.